Yesterday, Heisenling released Flux 2. After we have experienced highly capable models such as QW Image Edit Plus and Nabo Banana, the question is whether Flux 2 can bring us a lot of surprises. From its promotional video, we can see that Flux 2 is definitely a large multimodal model. It integrates image generation, editing, and reference generation. Moreover, it has certain improvements in its overall model architecture. It can also generate images with higher resolution. You can open the official Flux 2 website. On this page, we can see that there are mainly 3 available versions of Flux 2. One is called the Pro version, which is very strong in artistic expression. The second version is called Flux, which is a more accurate model. This refers to the degree of adherence to text prompts. The third version is called the Dev version. However, you must note that this version cannot be used for commercial purposes. What you are seeing now is the Flux 2 page on GitHub. Here we can also find some useful information. First of all, Flux 2 has 32 billion parameters, which is a truly astonishing quantity. It is recommended that if we want to run the Flux Dev version, we should try to run it on an RTX 4090, which has 24 GB of video memory. If we want to use Flux 2 now, there are mainly 2 ways. The first is that you can open the Heisenling playground here. We have free credits. You can select the Flux 1 model and the Flux 2 model. However, here we can only select the Flux version and the Pro version. The Dev version cannot be selected. The second way to use it is through ComfyUI, where you can use the Flux 2 Dev version. What you are seeing now is the ComfyUI page on GitHub. We can find Flux 2 in its examples. This includes the download addresses for the 3 model components and our workflow. You can download this image and drag it into your ComfyUI, and it will become the corresponding workflow. Of course, when using Flux 2, we must first update ComfyUI to the latest version. When downloading the model, you can download it directly via the provided link. Please note that this is our text encoder. The second is our main model. The third is our VAE. There are very detailed instructions here on which folder to place it in after downloading. Additionally, you can also download the corresponding model from the Flux repository on Hugging Face. At this address, we can see that the main model is an FP8 version. Note that its size has reached 35.5 GB. The encoder has 2 versions, BF16 and FP8. Be aware that the size of FP8 also reaches 18 GB, and the BF16 reaches 35.6 GB. Therefore, the encoder for the Flux 2 model is very large. It has almost caught up with the size of the main model. The last component is our VAE. This VA is moderately sized at 336 MB. I have also built a workflow on Running Hub. You can access this platform through Running Hub in the ComfyUI domain. Running Hub is a great online working platform because whenever new technology and new models appear, it follows up immediately. You can register for Running Hub using the invitation link in my video description. This will grant you 1,000 free credits. Additionally, you will receive 100 credits every day you log in to Running Hub. This way, you can try out your own workflows. Now, let's look at this workflow. First is the loading of the main model. The main model is still the 3 components of the model, and all 3 are new. The first is our main model. Since this one is already an FP8, we select default here. The second is our text encoder. We select this one here. You must note that the type must be selected as Flux 2. Then there is the VAE dedicated to Flux 2. These are our 3 model components. Next is the prompting section. The prompt itself is nothing special. However, everyone should note that the guidance here is set to 4.0 by default. Since it is a large multimodal model, it can be used for image generation, image editing, and also reference generation. Therefore, there will be relevant inputs for reference images here. There is a note here that says up to 10, which means a maximum of 10 images. There is also a detailed explanation here. If you only need 1 reference image, you can pass 1 of them. If you don't need any, you can pass both of them. If you need multiple, just use the same organizational structure to input more reference images. Next is the latent space section. Note that we are currently generating at a resolution of 1024 × 1024. To generate the latent space, we use empty flux2 latent. This is also a new node. Then comes the sampling section. Note that this sampling is an advanced sampler. Why use an advanced sampler? In the scheduler selection part, we use the Flux 2 scheduler here. This is a proprietary scheduler. If we choose the traditional KS sampler, this scheduler should not be among its preset schedulers. As we can guess from the name, this scheduler was developed specifically for Flux. Therefore, it must be connected to our sampler via Sigma. That is why we cannot use an ordinary sampler here, but instead use a custom advanced sampler. The rest of the parts are relatively simple. This is the seed. This is our conditional input. Note that there is no negative condition here either. Then this is our sampler. This is the scheduler we just talked about. After 20 steps of sampling, we will get an image. Note that in this workflow, I have passed all the reference generations. So this is a regular text-to-image generation. Looking at the prompt, I mainly generated an Oriental beauty. Now let's look at the generated result. Note that the sense of realism is very strong, unlike the Flux 1 model. Note that there are not too many horizontal lines on it. There is also no obvious oily chin shape. Therefore, I think its image generation capability is quite strong. Next, let's look at the second capability, reference generation. We now have two reference images. The first is an Oriental beauty wearing very fashionable clothing. The second is also an Oriental beauty, but her clothing is a very neat professional suit. Now, I want to transfer the clothing from image 1 onto the character in image 2. This is a virtual try-on. The reason I am doing this test is actually to test the consistency of the character. I believe that Flux 2 cannot possibly fail such a simple function. Virtual try-on should not be an issue. Let's look at the character consistency. Note that after generation, the addition of the clothing has some impact on the overall color tone. But notice that the character consistency is very strong. The two characters achieved a similarity of almost over 90%. This was a simple virtual try-on. Now let's try a slightly more complex virtual try-on. In this reference image, besides the jacket, there is also a top, a skirt, shoes, and a bag. Our prompt was changed to transfer the clothes and accessories from image 1 onto the female character in image 2. Let's look at the generated result. The consistency is also very strong. They are clearly the same person. Again, due to the addition of the clothing, the overall color tone is adjusted. We note that the jacket, the inner clothing, and the skirt are completely consistent with our reference image. The bag is also fine. We cannot see the shoes right now. But overall, this kind of virtual try-on, involving both clothing and accessories, suggests that Flux 2 has good capabilities in maintaining character consistency during reference generation. Next, let's test something different. This is a small example I used when testing Nano Banana. I have a floor plan of a building. Essentially, I wanted to generate a 3D rendering with a perspective view. Let's look at the generated result. Overall, it looks acceptable. However, there are some unsatisfactory aspects. For example, this area is actually a staircase, and we also marked it here. But you will find that when it generates, this area seems to have become a room. Now, let's look at the result generated by Nano Banana Pro using the same function and the same prompt. You will find that Nano Banana Pro grasps it accurately and generates it in more detail. Then, I conducted a further test. I wanted it to generate a real-world image of 4 rooms. We don't need to look closely at the specific prompt. Let's look at the result generated by Nano Banana Pro. This is excellent. If you compare it with its 3D overhead view, you will find that the consistency is very strong. Now let's look at what happens if I want Flux 2 to achieve the same function. I use the same reference image and prompt. Let's look at the final generated effect. First, these 4 images are not real-world scenes. Furthermore, the presentation of the realistic effect is not adequate. Also, the generation is completely random. For example, this place looks like an overhead view, while this place is actually a level view. It completely does not match the content shown in our reference image. Next, let's test its precise control. When testing QWN Image Edit Plus, we did a control generation. I want the character to stand in front of the word Flux 2, but behind the word coming. The prompt used is also the one we commonly used before. You will find that it cannot do this. It cannot be controlled very precisely. Therefore, I think its detail control capability is also average. Finally, let's do a stress test. You can see that there is a note stating that it supports 10 reference images. I didn't use 10, I used 6 images. I wanted it to generate a group photo of 6 girls during a spring outing. Look at the generated result. 6 people are present, which is fine. However, notice that 2 of the characters seem to be wearing exactly the same clothes, and 2 other characters also look similar. Furthermore, some characters simply did not appear. It fails with 6 images, let alone 10. Therefore, we recommend that you do not provide too many reference images. Generally, about 3 or 4 are enough. Some people wonder why the Flux 2 model is so large. In fact, there's another very important reason. It has done a lot of work on model review. We also conducted a simple test. We generated a realistic image of Venus. We know that Venus is typically depicted nude. It is very likely to be NSFW content. However, even though I wrote such a prompt, what did it generate? First, it was a Venus de Milo with broken arms. And secondly, this Venus was dressed, so you can see how much work this model has done on censorship. Regarding the Flux 2 model, I haven't done many systematic tests for everyone, because I feel that many capabilities do not need testing. I believe it can meet them. For example, style switching, image editing, removing objects, and adding objects. I think these are all fine. The tests I conducted were all uncommon or what I considered meaningful test cases. Through these examples, I wanted everyone to get a sense of the capabilities of the Flux 2 model. Well, what are you waiting for? Go and try it yourself. Follow me to become someone who understands AI.